Good afternoon. My name is Ricky. In the midst of creating my topic title for today's talk, I wanted to be as clever as possible, and it backfired. There were some of my friends who asked me, is your talk going to be about swimming? The answer is no. It's not going to be about swimming, which is why I decided to put that graphic over there in a graphical way of explaining to you what my talk is actually about. For the educators, value educators here today, if you have students, the assessment is a presentation type of assessment, I have a tip to share with you today. That's basically what I'm going to be talking about today. I can make this guarantee that if you use what I'm about to share with you today, you will make your students very, very upset. So let's go with it, okay? Once upon a time, there was a factory. And the job of this factory is to put products into these boxes on an operational line, right? On a line. Every once in a while, maybe once a day, the machine will misfire. It's supposed to put something in the box, but occasionally the box is empty. So the box reaches the end, and this is something that's very undesirable. Now, of course, the factory decided to get some engineers. They put some weight sensors on the line to detect whenever the box is empty, stop the line, remove the box, and then you'll go on. Now, ideally, there's supposed to be a robotic arm that will remove the empty box. But at that point in time, they didn't get to the point to design the robotic arm. This went on for a little while, and there were mistakes. They managed to pick up empty boxes here and there in the sensors. But suddenly, overnight, the empty boxes stopped. They didn't understand why there were no more empty boxes, so they went to the factory floor to check. And I think some of you will know how this story ends. One of the employees very cleverly decided to put an industrial-sized fan next to the production line and to turn it on. Whenever an empty box passes that fan, the fan will blow it away, and there's no need to stop the line whatsoever. I like this particular mindset because I am neither an educational academic nor an AI engineer. I am just a teacher. And because I don't have the skills or competencies needed to tackle AI in the AI way, I do what I can. So I will attempt to be that employee with the industrial fan. A lot has been said about generative AI. So I first want to say that generative AI does enable learning. I'm going to talk about myself, okay? You may have heard about this particular acronym from the internet Reddit lexicon. It's called ELI5 or LE5. It means explain it like I'm 5. I do use this. I chat with ChatGPT on a daily basis. And I ask it to explain a difficult concept which I don't understand, and ask it, explain it to me like I'm 5 years old, and it does a fairly good job of it. Secondly, I can have conversations with ChatGPT. Some of you might already know that this can be done, so pardon me. Konnichiwa.
こんにちは、リッキーさん。今日も日本語でお話ししましょうか。何か練習したいテーマがあれば遠慮なく言ってくださいね。
日本語会話を練習したいけど、今ですか？
もちろん、今お時間ありますよ。一緒に日本語で。
Okay, that was just to, basically what I asked ChatGPT was, I would like to practice Japanese with you now. Is it okay? And I do this once in a while. This conversational ability with ChatGPT can only be found on the app version on your phone, but it allows me to talk with somebody. And it's very difficult for me. I'm a very basic beginner learner, and I struggle to come up with the words. But ChatGPT-san is very, very patient with me. At least it's able to do this. The other thing that generative AI is able to do is to provide me examples to deepen my learning. For example, maybe I barely understand about some topic, like computational thinking, for example. Maybe I have some idea of what it is, but I can then ask generative AI to give me some further examples, please, so that I can navigate between this is what it isn't and this is what it is. So this definitely enables learning. The problem, though, is that generative AI enables our students to also cognitively offload their learning. As you can see in the image there, our students can choose to let generative AI do their homework for them. And then they spend that time playing computer games. Well, maybe they're doing something else, maybe they're socializing, which I think is all okay. But the point being that, we do want them to be doing their work, right? And this problem is particularly pervasive if that particular module or that subject is something that they don't want to do. if they've been forced to take that particular subject, then they just want to get the subject over with. Now, if they were interested, it's a separate matter, right? But if they were just sitting in the classroom and thinking, I just want to clear this module, therefore, in a particular assessment, they could use generative AI just to skip over most of the difficult stuff. In the module that I've been teaching, it unfortunately falls into that category. It is a module called CC2. Students in NTU are forced to take that module, most of the students are. And there is one particular assessment criteria, which is 35% of the grade, where they are asked to do a 10-minute presentation at the end of the semester. Now, the idea is they have to identify a real-world problem, and then at the end, they do this 10-minute presentation. But you can see where this is going, right? Because with generative AI, not only can they do the presentation with GenAI, they can even think about the problem with GenAI. Meaning to say, identify the problem, generative AI can do that for you. It can then write the script for you. Everything will be on the slides for you, and then the students simply read off the slides. It's not an exaggeration to say that they don't have to do a single piece of work. Maybe put in a few pictures here and there, paste all the words onto the slide, and then they can get it over with. In one form, it looks something like this. We intend to give them an assessment, make it a little bit difficult for them, and in that process of difficulty, they're supposed to learn something. But they end up, with generative AI, they skip over everything. And then they achieve that outcome at the end, which is, I clear my module. Yay! Yay for them. But for us, not so good, right? Let's just first be clear, okay? I think that limiting the use of generative AI is a futile thing. Students would use it anyway. My 8-year-old daughter is already talking to ChatGPT. There's no stopping this. So to say that students, you are not allowed to use generative AI is probably not going to work. They will find some way to work around this anyway. So we will have to find another way. So here's what I think. I think we need to move the goalpost a bit. The assessment stays the same. It is still a presentation. But could we move that end result, that trophy that they want to get, move it somewhere that is more difficult, rather than just hopping over the maze and getting their results? Could we then force them to dive underwater before they can reach that particular trophy? Make it a bit harder for them, you know? The other way of saying this is like that. Could we break the link between the students' preparation for their presentation and the actual assessment itself? Right now, what they can do is they can use generative AI to write their script, and then they can just simply narrate the script. Let's break that link somehow. I am unfortunately limited by the constraints of the module. The module says that the students have to do a presentation. So let's do a presentation, right? I have to do that. But I do have some autonomy to make some changes in the way I conduct my class and the assessment. So here is my idea. Now, before I get to the idea, there's a particular framework that I quickly want to mention, which is the framework by Dr. Ruben Puentedura. It is the SAMR framework. So starting from the bottom, technology can allow us to do a substitution. My phone is listening to me right now, it's scripting everything I say by accident. Technology in education can allow us to do some substitution. It can then do one step higher, make it do augmentation. Let's push it a little bit higher then. Transformative, we can do modification, a lot of significant task redesign, and then lastly, redefinition. What I'm suggesting is that the technology, generative AI technology, not only should it be for the M modification, not only should it be allowing for significant task design, my thoughts are that it is our imperative to redesign the task. Because if we don't, then the students basically just cruise through the assessment and they don't learn what they are supposed to be doing, at least in my opinion anyway. So here's my simple little idea. The idea is performative assessment. Perform meaning literally performing arts, perform. They do not have to have a drama background. They do not need to sing and dance, they don't. But the idea is in that direction, okay? Presentations with some constraints. So what are these constraints? Now, my objective in the first place is that I want to make my students unable to rely on the generative AI crutch for their assessment. Generative AI, feel free to use it as much as you can, but it's not going to save you from the presentation. The desired outcome would be, if I succeed, the students would be forced to internalize the content. okay? What I did not realize was that there were some unintended outcomes, which I will share with you. So here are the constraints. Remember this, I will share with you 2 constraints. If you apply this, your students will hate you. Constraint number 1. In their presentation slides, every single slide can only have 5 words. These 5 words include the title. The title is included in the 5 words. The only exception to this is if they are putting something like a chart or a graph. We've got bar graphs, we've got line charts. You need to have the words for the axis, right? So those are okay. That's fine. Other exceptions to this are maybe they want to put a comic strip, and the comic strip has some words. I also think that that is okay. The whole point being, I do not want them to read off the words as if it was a script. You understand that, right? So I think there is some leeway for this. The point being, I don't want them to read off it. Now, you might be thinking though, if the presentation was submitted to me and I'm supposed to grade the submission, how do I grade their submission if there were so few words? I don't understand what they want to express, because if I don't record down their presentation, there are no words for me to grade post-event, correct? So the students are asked to write their script into the note section of their presentation, or they can separately write their script onto a Word document and they submit it together. Now, whether they remember their script or not in the presentation, not so important. Because when I'm grading the content, that's what I'm grading on. As for the presentation itself, different thing, okay? So, 5 words per slide. That's the first one. Oh, by the way, as a nod to my students, I am attempting to stick closely to my own constraints in my presentation. Now, there are some words that are going to add extra, right? So please don't mark me down for this. Yeah, but I'm adding some more extra words. I'm keeping to that my own constraint. Here's the second constraint. Okay? First constraint, 5 words per slide. Second constraint, no scripts. They cannot read the scripts from their phone, not allowed to. They cannot hold any pieces of paper, nothing. 5 words per slide, that's it. Okay? So this creates a lot of anxiety in my students, naturally, even in myself. It makes me very, very anxious to want to present with no scripts whatsoever. So I have to give them some allowances and give them some leeway. The last thing I want is for them to be so stressed that they forget what they want to say. After all, it is an assignment, right? It's an assessment that I have to grade. And if they forget what they want to say, it's not fair. Because I'm not supposed to be grading the presentation. I'm supposed to be grading the content. So here are some allowances to make their lives a little bit easier. First one, they can use images as much as they want, and the images are meant to be triggers. So the images can be Pokemon, Pikachu, Lady Gaga, doesn't matter, Jack and the Beanstalk. It really doesn't matter. The point being is used to trigger the point that they want to say. Here's an actual example of the slide from last semester. If you look at that slide, without looking at any of the words on the right side, you might wonder what in the world the students want to say. But the students remember. In the script that they submitted to me, as you can see on the right side, okay, the upper left box is supposed to represent the staff of NTU library clocking into the library before office hours. That's what the image is supposed to say. On the lower left image where you see a calendar there, that is supposed to represent those dates where there was the COVID pandemic. So they remember that, and that's how they tell me their particular points. Okay? This is how they can do it without any script. The next allowance is no limit to the number of slides. They can use as many slides as they want, because there's going to be a lot of images. I don't really want the images to be tiny, you know what I mean? So I want the images to be slightly bigger. Yeah? So they can go as many slides as they want. In this particular presentation that the students submitted to me, they have 74 slides. But this is not the norm. The norm is about 30 slides. 30 slides. They can go fairly quickly. So last semester, 79 different presentations were assessed. I taught 8 classes of 10 groups each. One of the class only had 9 groups. So how did the students feel about this? In the very first time I told them these constraints, at week number 1, I tell them, here are your presentation constraints. So their reactions was, obviously, unhappy, right? On the left side, students were, why are you doing this to us? How did we hurt you? Why are you unhappy with us? That's the first one. The second type of students would be very, very anxious and very, very stressed. Ultimately, being on stage doing presentation is not something that everybody is comfortable with. So I completely understand. The other reason why you probably should not used my idea is because I experienced a 3% drop in my teaching evaluation for that semester. They don't like me very much now. But these were all expected. I knew that was going to happen. Despite the drop in teaching evaluation, I think that it is important that they do this, right? So what are some of the unintended outcomes then? Here's what they are. I reached out to my students last week, and I asked them, could you please reflect on my silly little 5-word constraint to you last semester and tell me what you think? And they wrote back only a few days ago. And some of them said that, strangely, the presentation itself wasn't stressful, but it was actually easy. Okay? And they can use different creative ways. They even further said that till today, or this semester, they decided to continue using it, even though I'm no longer their tutor for this semester. And they found it actually quite helpful. The words in blue are meant to symbolize that it can overcome the generative AI gap, okay? The use of generative AI. Other students said the same thing. These were all the students that replied to me. I thought I'll just give them a shout out and put their names here as well, okay? So the unintended outcome was that it actually made the presentation easier. Paradoxically, they felt that it was easier. They also felt that their presentations were more engaging, which I agree, because they can only look at me. And they had to remember what they had to say as they look at their particular points, but there was no narration. There was no other way around this. They have to know what they're talking about. And if they were to memorize everything, they will surely forget, right? So why don't you just understand it and then just talk about it? Makes it easier. And the third thing is, it's also enduring. Even up to today, some students said that this is the way I want to continue doing my presentations in future, which I thought was quite nice. Now, rounding back to my original analogy, the employee that put an industrial-sized fan, that industrial-sized fan is a one-trick pony. Just like my solution to you today is a one-trick pony. I am not an engineer. We need the engineer to build that sensors. We need the engineer to make something a lot longer lasting. What if the factory changes the weight of their boxes, right? It doesn't work anymore because the industrial fan cannot blow it away. So this is just my way of saying, I have a silly little way of overcoming this right now, okay? And it's for my colleagues, my fellow educators here, to make something more engineering-based. I'm under-engineered as of now. Let me leave you with a final parting quote that I read recently, which I like a lot. To walk a thorny road, we may cover its every inch with leather. Or we can make sandals. So in the road of AI for education, if you're grasping with the difficulty of students overcoming your assessments using generative AI, we could find many different technological ways to overcome all of these things. But I feel that my way of making sandals that can overcome many of this, just for myself, I speak for myself then, is my little silly mindset of under-engineering everything, just finding a way to get around it, and students cannot complain. And as an added bonus, they actually thank me for it. In case you're wondering, why is it that my teaching evaluation still went down, right? Because they evaluated me before the presentation. That's why. I hope that doesn't happen to you. I hope this was helpful to you in some way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ricky. We were actually talking about the assessment. I thought that you were getting your students to do a play or something since you talk about drama. So perhaps we can take one question from the floor. Anyone has a question for Ricky?
Yeah, hi. So my question is actually regards to ESL and more engineering types. I'm not completely sure what course exactly you taught, but in the event that you have an ESL student in the class, how would that affect your assessment, or how do you plan on changing some of the grading schemes because of things like that?
Thank you. I think, okay, first, the module that I'm teaching, which is CCO2, is Navigating the Digital World. It is a broad-based module. We don't go too deep into any of the technical aspects, right? So this suits me just fine. If there was a module that is, I actually don't understand what ESL stands for, but I'm assuming it's STEM related.
Language. English as a second language.
English as a second language.
Yeah.
Well, that's not going to work very well then. Because we do want is the ability to converse and just to speak part of the assessment?
I think that's the question for you, right? Because I think a lot of university students, they are not from Singapore, or they don't come from countries that have Singapore as their first language of instruction, right? So there are challenges basically for them to communicate.
Sure. I would speak from my experience where there are students from a foreign background coming to Singapore doing this particular module as well. They do tend to stick very closely to the script that they have on the slides. By removing this thing, it actually forces them to no longer rely on this. In fact, some of the students who replied were actually non-English speakers, and they found that it increased their confidence after that. I cannot say for certain though how it will help the specific module for yours if you require them to write out their scripts. This is a completely separate matter, right? But for them to converse without reading anything, I think it really increases their confidence in a good sense, or it might make them a lot more anxious, but I think with enough support, it should be okay. In fact, I would actually encourage it. Thank you.